It's 10:31. It's not
Sorry.
Different.
I thought it was different. At first, I thought it had something to do with development.
Oh.
Okay, we'll call the development committee meeting, DuPage County to order for April 1st and roll call please.
Member Krajewski? Member Rutledge?
Here.
Member Covert?
Here.
Member Ozog?
Here.
Vice Chair you? Chair Tornatori?
Here. And we have a quorum and we have no one on, Joe? Nobody?
Nope.
I have no chairman's remarks. Do you have any public comment?
No.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 18th.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any additions, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none, saying none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Informational, I'll entertain a motion to receive and place on file and update the administrator adjudication hearing program fees and fines collections procedures. Just for our own edification, we have a number of outstanding fines that are just out there and that have been liened on properties somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million. We've entertained a contract now with an attorney or a law firm as opposed to the state's attorneys working at it because it was just got too burdensome for them. They are going to be working diligently to try to collect these fines. Their fee is going to be 30%, but not paid by us. It's going to be paid by the debtor. So it costs us nothing. We've got lawyers out there now who are gonna hopefully be like dogs on a bone and try to collect some money from these people. So that's this particular adjudication program. Did I correctly state it? All right, moving on to regulatory, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
There's no motion, or there was no vote on that motion.
There was no vote on it. It's information, right? Yeah, okay. Am I right? Or,
Well, typically we receive a place on file.
I'm sorry,
It's a main
okay.
motion, so you have to.
all right, is there a motion on that?
So moved.
You're correct. All those in favor?
Aye.
Stand correct. Thank you, Council. Moving on to regulatory, I'll entertain a motion to approve 250877 ZSE 25-1 Medina Country Club's approval to have their 4th of July fireworks schedule for July 4th.
So moved. Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to approve item 7B 25-0878 ZSE 25-2 Naperville Country Club's fireworks display for Sunday, June 29th.
So moved. Second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to approve ECO 15-25 zoning 25-1 zoning hearing officer's recommendation to deny variation to allow one horse on a property less than 40,000 square feet. They're already here. Rutledge sighing about this one. It's a horse issue. And the variation to reduce the required rear yard setback for horse stable from 30 feet to approximately 10.44 feet. There a motion to approve.
I have a question.
There a motion to approve first.
Second.
There's a second. Did I hear a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Okay, question, yes. Member Cover.
How many, well, it seems like this property wants one horse on this property, and it says it's less than 40,000 square feet. What is the approximate square footage? Well, it says 19,999, but what is the required square footage?
40,000 square feet,
For one horse?
right? Well,
So in order to have a horse on your property, you have to have at least 40,000 square feet, builder's acre,
Just one horse?
just one horse. And then for each additional 20,000 square feet thereafter, you get another horse. So if you had 60,000 square feet, you get 2 horses. Anything under 40,000 square feet, no horses.
road.
Thank you, Chair. In the packet, it said that this property owner owned east, west, south, or 3 parcels right around. But there is no mechanism for him to try to use part of that. Of course, I looked at the map and there were homes on both of those properties as well, right? Okay.
The homeowner, the person owns 4 properties, this being one of them, but there are single family homes on those properties, so we can't use those other properties to make up the square footage.
And just for Chair, it's too small and I don't like one horse. You need a goat.
That's
Horses
right, you gotta
are
have, that's.
herd animals, so I would
You're
not be in
always-
favor of this anyway.
You're always about more than one animal on the property. Okay, so there's a motion and a second to approve it. So if we want to, overturn the zoning hearing officers, you would vote. Yes. Roll call, please. And if you don't want it, obviously you vote no.
Member Rutledge,
No.
member Colbert,
No,
member Ozark,
No.
Chair Tornatori,
No. Okay, and the motion fails. Moving on to item 7D, I'll entertain a motion to approve DC 016-25 zoning 25-3. Upon the zoning hearing officer recommendation to deny a variation of substitute paved surface driveway for a gravel driveway.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Any questions? Paul, you give us a little background other than the obvious.
This is a property where the driveway was put in. Not only the driveway, but a parking space was put in on the property. Our code requires that it be hard surface, gravel, concrete, or brick paver. This is all, I'm sorry, not gravel, asphalt, concrete, or brick paver. This is all gravel driveway leading back to a gravel parking spot. The way we came to find out about it is there were some other code enforcement issues that were occurring on the property that shouldn't, we're not trying to prejudice the situation, but this is one of the reasons why we require a hard surface. This is a side driveway that has been being used for something other than domestic purposes. And the zoning hearing officer recommended to deny.
So it's currently paved.
It is
No.
gravel. It's not.
It's substitute, oh, so we're not substituting one for another, it's in lieu of.
He's asking to leave it gravel as opposed to.
Got it, okay, I was.
Sorry, Bill.
But you were there. for
What the
other-
substitute was.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You were there for other issues.
And it's substantial. It's almost 300 feet deep.
Yeah.
Very large driveway. The house on the property is located up towards the road. So it's really, in addition, the testimony was that it exists. It's a matter of a financial burden to remove it. As you're aware, financial burden is something that the zoning hearing officer can't consider in hardship or practical difficulty.
Any questions of Paul? Yes.
I think you answered my question, but I just want to just clarify. Because when I looked at the map, there's a long driveway, but there was a huge gravel area at the back.
Correct.
And to me, it looks like that's gonna be used for parking other vehicles, because I think they said it was a play area, but to me, it looked like it was obvious that, so that was being done right now? Or,
Right now, it is not being used for anything. And it's just gravel parking area back
Okay.
in the back there. To the street. The use of the property was something other than what that was permitted on the property before. Even if they wanted to make it a play area, it could not be gravel.
right, okay, all right, thank you.
Ouch.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Roll call, please.
member Colbert,
no,
member Rutledge,
No.
member Ozark,
No,
Chair Tornatori,
No, and the motion failed. We got to item 7E. I'll entertain a motion to approve 25-0916 T-2-25 text amendment to proceed to public hearing for the DuPage County Zoning Board of Appeals to consider proposed text amendments to our zoning ordinance specifically related to T-2-25. Proposed text amendment creating two new zoning districts, R-3A and R-4A, aimed at advancing the goals of the Ad hoc Housing Solutions Committee to promote and develop additional attached and detached dwelling units in unincorporated DuPage County. I believe everyone has the text amendments. I'm sure you haven't read them all at this particular point, but this is the opportunity to deal with, well, all I explained it, but certainly going to try to help us out with our affordable housing and a number of other things.
Right. In anticipation of the Ad hoc Housing Committee getting back together for meetings, I think starting this month. This is a fourth in the line of text amendments that we are proposing to make. We already made three and the county board has adopted those. This will be the fourth one, and the whole idea is to move the Housing Solutions Initiative forward to scale up more, to provide more opportunities to scale up more housing units. One thing that's important to know here is that we are asking you to allow us to go to public hearing before the zoning board of appeals. After which time, anything that the zoning board of appeals will come back for this board for consideration and vetting before the board, full county board as well. The other thing that's important to note too is that this is to establish two new residential zoning districts. We would not be proposing at this time to put any properties into the zoning districts. Just create sort of placeholder zoning districts in anticipation of hopefully the county coming up with a housing program that would include land banking, housing, land trust, and other types of trust. Once we establish that, it would be our goal, if these new zoning categories are created, to take the county-owned property and have the county rezone those properties into one of these two new zoning categories that would then allow whoever the county might participate or partner with in terms of selling or giving these county-owned properties over to, those people could just come in and start building as of right. They would not have to go through the entitlement process. You may recall that in some of our discussions at ad hoc committee, some of the issues in terms of scaling up housing were regulation and entitlement process, the time it takes for people to go through that process. We're hoping that with these two new zoning districts and then the county superimposing the zoning districts over county-owned land, it'll make that entitlement and regulatory process much more easy for developers to navigate. The substance of these two text amendments are in the R3 and the R4 zoning districts. Those are our most dense one dwelling zoning districts. We haven't underlined or struck through anything here because these are going to be brand new zoning districts. You typically, when you see new zoning or new regulations that are underlined and highlighted, we're not doing that here because we didn't want to add to all the data that's in here. But these R3 and R4 zoning district regulations are essentially the same land uses, bulk regulations, permitted obstructions, and general regulations that we already have in the R3 and the R4 zoning districts. The main differences between the R3 and R4A than the R3 and the R4 is we are proposing to allow for two dwelling units, two attached or detached dwelling units in these zoning districts as opposed to just a single dwelling unit. In addition, in order to accomplish that, the lot sizes are proposed to be smaller than what we currently have in the R3 and the R4A. We're also proposing that the bulk regulations, square footage of property, setbacks, floor area ratio, that's the relationship of how much building you can have on the property, the size of the property. The setbacks are going to be less than what we see currently in the R3 and the R4A. Not dramatically less, but smaller, and the FAR, the floor ratio, is going to be increased. So right now in the R3, you're allowed 0.3 of the size of the property. In the R4, 0.35. We're increasing that to 0.5. And the idea there is that we'd be able to create more properties available and more opportunities for people to build on those properties. And once again, our intent would be to, if we get this zoning category, to superimpose this category over county-owned properties. It would still be available for other people to come in and ask for relief, but they would have to go through the entitlement process. The other important thing with this text amendment is that most of the R3 and R4 zoned properties right now are superimposed over subdivisions in the unincorporated area where the lot sizes are already smaller in size than what the R3 and the R4 zoning districts require. For instance, with sewer and water, an R4 zoning district requires 10,000 square feet. Most of the R4 zone properties in the county right now were platted back in the 1920s, 1930s, and those lot sizes are usually smaller than 10,000 square feet already. One might ask, well, why don't we just change the R4 and R3 zoning districts to what we're doing in R4 and R3A? The reason we're not doing that, that would upend all those subdivisions. So what we're proposing is this new regulation that would only be superimposed right now on county-owned properties. But the underlying land that we would entitle is going to be pretty much the same size as the lots that practically exist out there already. So doing our research, we feel that there's really not going to be that much of an impact on those properties that we're thinking to rezone. We're not going from 40,000 square foot lots in a neighborhood that exist down to 8,000 square foot lots. Most of the lots are already going to be around 8 to 10,000 square feet already. But those are the things that we will vet at public hearing and we'll bring back to you depending what the zoning board of appeals does.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions because I'm somewhat confused. We've got districts that are R3 and R4.
Right.
And I thought we were taking those districts and now making them R3A and R4A. But as I understand what you just said, we're only doing that for county-owned properties.
The R3 and the R4 zoning districts, R3 and R4, we're not touching those. Those will remain.
These are new.
We're gonna create a new zoning category called R3A and R4A.
For county-owned properties. Now, what are they currently zoned?
Most of those properties are currently zoned R3 and R4.
Okay, so, what, isn't that what I just said?
If we were to, in the R3, let's just take R3 for purposes. In the R3 zoning district, the minimum lot size for a property on sewer and water is 15,000 square feet. What we're proposing for an R3A is a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. So rather than just change the R3 section where we have many properties out there that are currently zoned R3 that have property sizes that are grandfathered in that are less than 15,000 square feet and some that are more than 50,000 square feet, rather than mess with those properties, we would create this new zoning category, R3A, which would allow for a 10,000 square foot lot. Keep in mind, when we create this new zoning district, we're not rezoning any properties at this time. It's just a placeholder so that when we create a housing program, one of the things that we'll do in the housing program is take the county-owned properties that we want to put into a housing land bank. And then we would come to you all and try and rezone those properties to R3.
I understand it's gonna be no problem. I'm still confused. This is a piece of property.
Right.
And it's R3 now.
Right.
It's gonna stay R3.
If it's owned by a private company.
Okay,
or
if it's
private-
owned by us, it's now gonna go from R3 to R3A or R4A.
Correct.
So we are gonna take R3 and R4 zoning districts and change them, but only if they're owned by the county.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I thought I said.
Sorry.
But no, but I just want to be clear. So now this property is owned by the county in an R3 zoning district. This county is owned by me next door. I can build 2 houses over here on a smaller lot, but I can't do it here.
Correct.
How are we gonna get past that? How am I gonna get past me suing the county for not letting me do what the county can do?
Because you're in a different zoning district.
Well, only because we created a new one.
We created it, and then we vetted it for that particular property. Once we create the zoning
That's
district,
not spot zoning, that's special.
so
You're
we,
screwing me out of being able to put 2 houses on my property because you own the property, we own the property next door. I don't know how we can get through that.
two
They
things,
said they could apply for relief.
two things. First of all,
Yeah, I gotta go through.
we have to go through the zoning process to rezone that property, for which notification goes out to property owners within 300 feet, which would be you. And you can come to the hearing and say that very thing. At that point, we would say to you,
And then I get grumpy about Carthel that says no.
well, what I'm getting,
Or whomever, and then what do I do?
what I'm getting at is you have the right to petition the county to ask for the same zoning district as well. As a private citizen, you can ask for the exact same zoning. district.
Yeah.
You can
Okay,
buy a lot.
I could buy the county owned lot. How about the county owned buying my lot?
That's-
Now what happens there?
Actually,
That's a
that's.
possibility.
If the county buys my lot, does it automatically go to R3-4?
No, because once again, even though we create the zoning district, we are not rezoning any properties. Now we've got a district in hand. We go to it, we create the land bank, and we've got these county-owned properties. We then go to zoning board, we'll come back to the development committee, we'd say, we would like, or to the ad hoc housing committee, and say, we'd like to go forward to rezone this county-owned property to R4 or R4A. And presumably get the mandate, we go through the entire public hearing process, go to the ZBA, vet it at public hearing, development committee, county board, and hopefully we get the new zoning district on this property. Now, someone next door can say, I want the same thing. They can apply for zoning relief as well and ask for R4A, and they can get exactly what the county gets on R4. It's not that it's
But the
a
county's
county.
already got the district set up. That's what we're doing here, right?
We have the district set up, but we haven't rezoned the individual property that the county owns. We still have to go through the vetting process, just like the person who owns this property next door.
Maybe it's my litigious nature. I don't know. I'm just wondering. I just don't. I think it's a great idea. Don't get me wrong. I'm just concerned about how adjacent or similarly situated properties in, you know, a nearby area are, if they're gonna feel some sort of discrimination because they're not county owned.
Well, being a county-owned property is not dispositive of the zoning district. We still have to go through the entitlement process to rezone. An example, and I don't wanna go down a rabbit hole here, but an example is, we have properties that are zoned R4 single family that are immediately adjacent to properties that are zoned B1. So
We
you,
didn't create a new zoning district to cause that problem.
well, no, the county did create a zoning
Well-
district at some point. The point that I'm getting at is that more importantly, the fact that we have a new zoning district in the county zoning ordinance that says R43 means anybody in the county can take it, I'm sorry, R4A or R3A. The fact that we have that zoning district, it doesn't mean it is only available to the county on county-owned property. Anybody can come in and say, hey, I see you got an R3A zoning district. I want to rezone my property to that. They can go through the vetting process, just as the county would have to go through the vetting process, meaning public hearing, development committee, county board to get approval. And we would have to make the argument that R3A on this property, just so happens that the county owns it, makes sense for these reasons, just
So
the
these
same.
districts aren't gonna be in a district per se,
No,
like.
or a clump of-
They're gonna be everywhere,
They're gonna
potentially,
be anywhere potentially. Now, for example,
owned by the county. or
the
owned by
property just
county.
happens to be owned by
You
the
could have
county.
an R3A in Naperville and an R3A in Bensonville, it
Sure.
doesn't really matter.
And the reason we went R3A and R4A is those are our most dense one-family dwelling units right now. And rather than go into R2 and R1, R2 and R1 are rural lots, minimum 40,000 square feet for R2, minimum 100,000 square feet for R1. So we don't want to go into those areas because those are intended to be rural. The R3 and the R4 are intended to be urban lots, smaller lots, consistent with what we see in municipalities that are adjacent to these properties as well. The reason that we chose the A in the R3 and the A in the R4 is that most of our properties that we own, if not all of them, are already zoned R3 or R4. So for instance, we had a property that was owned by the county zoned R4. We would look to zone that property R4A. We wouldn't look to zone it R3A because it'd be consistent with practically the development that's already occurred, and that's why we have it as R4 historically. But we would not be looking to take an entire subdivision and say, you are now all R4A. We'd only be looking at essentially one or two or three properties that the county might own in an R4 subdivision that we now want to use as part of our housing solutions program to scale up more uses or more buildings. And we would rezone those properties to the R4A. And we'd still have to go through the vetting process, public hearing, development committee, county board.
And it still could be adjacent to or next to the current R3 or R4 property.
It will be,
Which
it will be.
Will
yeah.
be, which will have next to a county-owned property where the county or a developer will be able to build something on that lot, which is very different from what I own because I wasn't allowed to do that when it was R3. That's what I'm trying to get at here is that
No, they are not entitled to do, just
I know they have to go through the process. I get that.
But if I'm zoned R4A, I'm entitled to come in and meet all the R4 regulations, which fundamentally different than the R4 is I get to build 2 units on my property.
It's a pretty
the guy next
fundamental
door-
difference though, if you get to build 2 units.
Maybe
That's my
it's-
point.
You could do that.
Only gets one.
Yeah, well, okay, so my neighbor can put 2. And I
Connie
can
can
only
put,
put
Connie
one.
can put 2 and I only get 1. Now the neighbor, you can go, well, I want 2. And you can apply for zoning relief as well to get your property zoned into that zoning district.
Okay, I'm sorry I dominated. Who had? Yes, go ahead.
Paul, so
I'm trying to understand, if R three, the minimum is 15,000 square feet, and R three A, the minimum is 10,000 square
Correct.
feet, then what is 4 and 4A?
4 for sewer and water is 10,000 square feet that has sewer and water. 4A would be 8,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you, that's it.
Member Rosa.
Member Rutledge was first.
Member Rosa.
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions. I think Sam's remedy would be to put an ADU on his property.
So when we brought the ADUs to you, which we just approved a couple of months ago, when we brought the ADUs to you, we allow for ADUs by conditional use on property, which essentially allows you to have a second dwelling unit on your property attached, or a second dwelling unit on your property in an existing detached structure.
Has to be there
It
already.
has to be there already. And the minimum size of that ADU, I think, is 1,000 square feet that you could max out in.
Okay.
The reason we chose not to do a blanket ADU was that, A, we already have that, and instead of it being an as of right, the county board wanted to be a conditional use. So in that scenario, people still have to come through the entitlement process. And
an ADU?
accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
It's accessory dwelling unit is a dwelling unit that is subordinate to the principal. So, for instance, on a zoning lot, you're entitled to have so many square footage. With an ADU, what we said is you can have no more than 1,000 square feet in your accessory dwelling unit, irrespective of how much square footage you can have on your property. And so that basically limits the size of the ADU to be subordinate to the principal building. And it likely then the people that would be living in that accessory dwelling unit would be a family member or just a single renter. It'd be very difficult to get a family in that accessory building. And that purpose, the purpose of that code change was to scale up more rental properties, more opportunities for rentals. What we're talking about here is the ability to have more properties available for homeownership. And to put more properties into the market.
And the answer is that I don't want an ADU. I want what was
Understood,
always
Sam.
there, which was a house of a certain.
Change happens, Sam, I'm sorry.
No, it's
But-
the
but-
debate.
That's, I'm the get off my lawn guy, okay?
Yeah, I get it.
I want what I've always had next to me, and I don't know why it's being changed right next door. And not me. See, that's I'm concerned. I just don't know whether or not, and maybe it's an issue that's never gonna happen, but.
There's a lot more to this, on when you start to get into why the county-owned properties would be eligible for more development on them. And rather than make a developer go through that entitlement process, we're proposing to have a zoning district in case, at least, that would allow for smaller lots, smaller setbacks, more opportunity to build more units on those lots. Getting into the minutia, which we will be presenting at the zoning board of appeals, is that the county-owned lots that we're talking about are properties that were clean and lean properties that have been dilapidated for years. So that effectively, what we have done with these properties, the county's gone in and taken an eyesore out of the neighborhood that for the last 10, 15, 20 years has been a problem for the neighborhood. In some instances, those properties weren't paying any real typical property taxes on them because they were abandoned and dilapidated, and the assessor had them assessed as abandoned properties. So we're basically doing a program where we've cleaned the
We're
property.
doing a service for the neighborhood.
And in return, then we're coming in and asking to be able to do more units on these properties. And effectively, the lot sizes that we are proposing are generally consistent with the existing lot sizes that are in the neighborhood already. So while we understand that there will be concern about, you get 2 and I only get 1, we think we can mitigate that concern with, well, where we're putting 2 new houses is on a property that for years was an eyesore and a problem for the neighborhood. 2, the lot sizes and the density that we're talking about is generally consistent with practically what's going on in this neighborhood already. There are already smaller lots. In some of the instances where, and this is what we've been presenting as evidence as to, and testimony as to why we think this makes sense in a particular area, is that many of the properties that are surrounding these properties are themselves somewhat blighted. They're rentals. They're not owner occupied, so people aren't taking care of them. So we think that all of these things combined will allow the county to, through a housing program, build more units, reinvigorate the neighborhood, because the properties that we're using were in bad shape to begin with, and the adjacent properties aren't the best either, and many of them are rental. That's the burden of proof that we would have to submit when we are going to rezoning. Why does it make sense for these county-owned properties to be rezoned to this district? And all of that side argument would be brought to bear in our public hearing as to why it makes sense for these properties.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you had other questions.
No, Jim was sitting next to me. I didn't think I was gonna get him in, so I asked my other question. My question was, are they vacant and how are we getting this information out to developers once we approve all of this? So, and Jim pretty much answered those questions for me, so.
Member Ozai.
Okay, two quick questions. About how many acres are we talking about? If, what, off the top of your head, county-owned properties sitting out there? Some top of your head. I do.
We mentioned at our county board meeting when we presented, where we're at so far, that we get a map out to you. We have that map available now. It's interactive map. We will be sharing it with you probably later this week, if not next week. There's a few things that I want to do with the departments, because you will see on this map, it's like our GIS map. You'll see on this map, we have indicated who owns the property, what department owns the property. We've got Health Department, Public Works, Environmental Concerns, Stormwater, Building and Zoning. In this map, it'll break it down to municipalities, unincorporated areas, county board districts. We'll also show the floodplain and wetland on that map. You'll see it's all the properties that the county owns, and it includes this campus as well. So we know that this campus is not developable, but we wanted to show you all the properties that the county owns. And you'll also see that many of the properties are inundated with special management areas. And so it makes some of those properties very difficult to develop. But we wanted to have a baseline for you to see. The total number of properties is dramatic. There's a lot of them that we own. And we will get that map out to you with those numbers probably by the end of this week, if not next week. We're going to be sending to you through a blind CC, and it's just for county board members viewing at this point only. But it'll have all that data on there for you. And like I say, it's a baseline to get us started with what properties the county owns, so we can get an idea of what we're talking about.
Okay, my second question was, this would allow only 2 units. So you could build, let's just use the example. You have a single family home here. You could build an attached townhome with a first floor garage.
So
Could you do that? But you'd have to follow all of the various, access and egress, all of that sort of thing would have to fit the zoning regulations.
correct. And zoning,
But
building,
that would be the maximum that you would be building,
not more than 2 dwelling units.
so 2 family units could be in 1 lot.
Correct.
Okay.
And to be clear, and I don't mean to parse, well, I do mean to parse these words, is that the predicate for all residential in the world is called a dwelling unit.
Yeah.
And we have, all of us in our various jurisdictions have assigned different nomenclature to that dwelling unit. If you're in an urban city, you might call an attached dwelling unit, you might call them row houses.
Right.
In an urban area or in a rural area, we call them townhouses. We're not putting any nomenclature on these terms: single family, multifamily, townhouses, condos, duplexes, apartments. We're stripping that language from this ordinance and saying this is the ability to do 1 and 2 family dwellings on a property. So we get away from, well, that's just a townhouse or that's just a manor house. We have the ability, we vetted this with the state's attorney's office. We have the ability to have 1 and, attached dwelling units on a property or detached dwelling units on the property. This new ordinance would allow for no more than 2 dwelling units, either attached or detached, to be on a property.
So you could not build like a city 5+1, where you've got 4 living units and parking underneath or 3 level, whatever. So
Yeah.
2 units. Okay.
Two dwelling units would be the max.
Okay, thank you.
Could they be detached?
It could be detached, yeah.
Okay.
And one might say, well, that's just a principle with a ADU. And the answer there is that in our current ADU regulations, ADUs require conditional uses. B, there's a maximum square footage on the ADU. That would not be the case here. We've raised the FAR in this zoning district to 0.5. So you could have 2 detached dwelling units that could potentially be 2,500 square feet in size each on a 10,000 square foot lot. It just allows more options. And once again, the county would still have to go through the zoning process and prove up our case on these particular properties. And we think we have a fairly compelling case, given the history of some of the property that the county owns and how we came to get that property.
Yes.
Sorry,
No
now you
problem.
triggered a question. So for stormwater purposes, if they have more than 2,500 square feet of impervious, if they add that, and they don't have room for it, then that'll be like a no, right?
So if someone were to apply, the answer would be, there are other options available where they could do fee in lieu of.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But if the property were rezoned and it was a county property, the county property would be part of a housing program. And so there would be other conditions, but relative to all the other county disciplines, they'd have to meet those requirements. If it's on septic and well, they'd have to meet the septic and well requirements for 2 dwelling units. If it's on building, if it's an attached, there's gonna have to be regulations for attached buildings and detached buildings. Same thing with the stormwater codes. They won't get any relief from those other codes. So if they're over 2,500, they're gonna have to provide a best management practice. And if they can't provide it, the question at that point would be, typically with a best management practice, as you know, in order to get out from underneath that, you have to show that your water tables are too high and it can't sustain a rain garden. We would be looking as part of the comprehensive plan to say, well, in that case, it's not just doing fee in lieu of because your water tables are too high. We want to be able to do fee in lieu of if you don't have a place to put it on your property. And that would be something as part of this other larger housing solution program that we're looking at it to see if we can go into some of the other departments and say, what can you give to this program? Such as doing a fee in lieu of, not because your water table is too high, but because there's something else going on that causes you to do a fee in lieu of. If the stormwater group says, no, we're not gonna do that, then that could be difficult. You're gonna have to put a BMP on your property or downsize your units. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? And remember, the county's going to be going for all of this, all of these uses and the ability to do this before the very same committee that approved it in the first place, the zoning board of appeals. Which is gonna be the argument that's gonna be made by the neighbor. This is the kangaroo court. You're going before the very people who allowed you to do this in the first place. I think we gotta think about that at some point.
Understood.
Maybe there's not that many properties that are gonna have the grumpy neighbor next door. I don't know. But I worry about, I don't worry about it, but I'm contemplating that there could be some issues with people who are just gonna think this is unfair and the county's being treated preferentially, which is true. Because we want to do something, which is affordable housing, which is great. But again, when you're the neighbor, that might not be in that person's best interest. If for whatever reason they think that having not an accessory dwelling unit, but 2 units next to a single family is in their best interest. Okay, I'm sorry. We have a motion and a second. Now there's people waiting to get in.
We don't.
Do we have yeah, I was gonna say.
I thought we did.
No, we don't.
I'll move.
Second.
Yeah, we had all this discussion on a motion and a second. Where are you telling me what to do? We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries, and that'll be an interesting discussion at ZBA. Any old
There's
business?
no questions from Grant.
Any old business? Any new business? Without objection or adjournment. Thank you.